Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Dark Matter Season 2, Episode 1, Welcome to Your New Home. In this video, I'll give my full detailed review of Season 2 premiere of Dark Matter, so I'll have to give a spoiler warning up to Season 2, Episode 1 if you haven't seen up to this point. You may not want to watch this video, otherwise some things may be spoiled for you. So yeah, this was a great, solid introduction to Season 2, and it has me very excited for the new season. Going back and watching the quick review I did for Season 1 of this show, I realized I was a bit harsher on this show than I should have been, which may have given people the wrong impression that I didn't really care for this show, but I do. I've been waiting for Season 2 to start and would have been massively disappointed had the show not returned, and this premiere did not disappoint. So the episode takes off right where Season 1 left off, with 2, 3, and 4 being put into prison, while 1 and 5 are simply being held in another cell, as technically they're not criminals like the others are. And 6 reveals to them that he was in fact the one who turned them in and betrayed them, and because he discovered that he was an undercover agent whose job it was to bring in these mercenaries. And the explanation he gives as to how this occurred fits absolutely perfectly into the lore of the show, so it makes it apparent to me that the showrunners had been planning this all along. So I really have to compliment them for that, because far too often shows will make abrupt changes for purposes of plot that are too obvious that the showrunners just came up with at the last minute and doesn't really care if it fits into the lore of the show. Shows like 24, Prison Break, and Orphan Black come to mind at doing this, but I didn't for a single instant get that feeling here. In fact, I like how the whole show is building on the theme of the premiere episode of the crew losing their memories as they are still trying to find out who they are, and the storyline has led 6 to discovering his purpose was to arrest the others, and so here we are. So let me talk about each character's storylines in this episode, and I'll start with the android who barely appears in this episode, but it was a great scene as we saw her refuse to cooperate with the GA, and just the way she matter-of-factly states that if they tried to force the information from her that they'd just lose it all was so awesome. It was definitely in keeping with how they established this character. So now let me get into the number ordering, starting with 1. His storyline was really interesting as he actually gets out of it completely by being a rich guy. He's able to get lawyers to bail him out immediately. But the thing that kind of frustrated me about his storyline is I kept expecting him to bail out 5 and offer her a place to stay. He does, after all, have buttloads of money. But when he brings it up with his lawyer, who simply tells him to forget about it, he does, which frankly I think goes against his character and was done more for plot convenience than anything else. He instead focuses on his wife's murder, and funnily enough, the CEO of his company tells him to drop it and he doesn't. And again, it seems to me that this was just done for plot convenience, because how come he ignored him when he was told to drop it, but he didn't ignore his lawyer when she told him to drop it with 5? So I really think it would have made a lot more sense for him to stick up for 5 and buy her out of prison, as well as find her a place to stay, put her up somewhere. But it was obvious that the plot required him to focus more on the murder of his wife, and that the show has different plans for 5. But getting back to the murder of his wife, he asked to question a witness to her murder or someone who was involved in it, and when he does, the witness mysteriously dies. So it's obvious something is up, and the most likely conclusion that one could draw, and in fact is the one that one draws, is that the CEO guy is responsible for everything as a way to take the company away from him. I'm really hoping that that isn't the case, as that would be a bit too cliched, as we've seen this story about the CEO trying to steal the company away from the inheriting son so many times before. So I hope they take this in a different direction. However, it's obvious that something is up, and that it wasn't 3 who murdered his wife. So I think framing him was all part of a larger plan against these mercenaries, so I can't wait to see how this plays out. But of course, the big shock comes in when Jace Corso, the mercenary that one was impersonating, shows up and kills him. So that was a huge shock, and I'm actually kind of hoping that the show will come up with some weird sci-fi excuse to bring him back to life, but I doubt it, as it seems like something a show would do would kill off a main character they don't think is working in the season premiere. Personally, I've always liked One as a character, and I didn't really understand all this hate against him, but regardless, he's dead now. So the question is, will Jace Corso become a main character? Will he perhaps steal One's identity and try to become the CEO of the company? Seems like a risky plan, as soon as someone gives him a DNA test, they'd find out the truth. But it would be a way to keep that actor in the show, so I'm unsure at this point, and I think it could go either way. Personally, I hope they don't do that, and I'm not really interested in Jace Corso, but I guess we'll see. I'm also disappointed that they killed off One, as this storyline with his wife was actually leading to something, and I wanted to see it followed up on, but perhaps they will follow up on it in some other way, but I was more interested in seeing how he would deal with it. So next, let's move on to Tu, who didn't have a whole lot to do in this episode, as she was put into solitary for most of it, but they mainly used her storyline to introduce us to the new character of Nyx, whom I recognize the actor as having a brief appearance as a Red Priestess on Game of Thrones this season. Anyway, she seems like another really interesting character, and the fact she managed to hold her own against Tu in a fight may imply that she's some sort of artificial life form, but I doubt it. I think it's just there to show us that she's a good fighter. Now, I must admit, I did find the fight scene where she was protecting Three slightly cheesy, but it's okay because it was used to introduce this new character who looks really interesting, and I think will add a lot to the story going forward. So now let me talk about Three, who's always been my least favorite character of the show. However, I didn't find his storyline in this episode too bad, as it mostly served as comic relief, and I thought it actually worked really effectively in that regard. And I'm starting to warm up to this character when he's not blustering about how much he likes guns and shooting things. But yeah, this storyline was good in establishing the location of the prison, but didn't really have any lasting consequences for the story overall. So then we come to Four, who's quite interesting. He should, was more of a showcase about how badass these mercenaries are and how famous they are, as the lead gang in the prison, led by a name named Rex, who gets a lot of privileges and therefore is more interested in keeping the peace, goes to Ford to tell him to toe the line. But of course they have no intention of doing so, and it was so great how Ford purposely started a riot to see how the guards would handle it, which leads to him finally meeting with 2 and 3 about how they are all going to break out of an inescapable prison. And I love how the three of them were just like, fine, let's do this. And of course they're going to gain help from some new characters like Nyx, so I can't wait to see how they handle this. Although my only hope is that they don't stretch the storyline out too far and make it like a prison break season. In particular, I hope they don't leave it to the season finale to show them breaking out, as I could see myself getting a bit tired of the storyline after a long time, but we'll see. So now let's talk about 5, who didn't have a whole lot to do in this episode, mainly dealing with the betrayal of 6 and seeing how close these two were. It makes sense she'd be the most hurt by it. It was interesting seeing how she was treated differently because she's not a criminal but also not rich like 1, so she was more of just shoved to the side, and 6 genuinely seems to want to help her but is finding he's not really able to do that. So let's go ahead and talk about 6 now, as I think where his story goes from here is quite clear. Not saying that's a bad thing, in fact I'm quite excited to see how this plays out, as again this plays right into the theme of these people trying to rediscover who they are and if indeed they are still those people, which is an interesting theme to play out. 6 obviously seems to be making peace with the fact that he's a GA agent and feels the need to fit into that role, but he's finding things are more complicated than simply following the law, as the governing power is clearly very corrupt, as he discovers that they were responsible for committing the atrocities that he was so much against. And more he's finding that the side he chose might have been the wrong side. Reminds me a lot of when Lando Calrissian made made a deal with Darth Vader in Empire Strikes Back, as he kept saying this deal is getting worse all the time. And I think that's only going to intensify, especially after they took 5 away to do who knows what to her, and that seems to be his strongest connection. As at the moment, he still feels connected to 5 and 1, but I would guess through the course of the season, he's going to begin to feel connected to 2, 3, and 4 again, as well as, and learn to regret betraying them, as there's definitely some conspiracy out there to wipe out the crew of the Rosa, and some bigger underworkings here that we all don't know about. So I think as he uncovers it more, he'll learn who his real friends are and who his real enemies are. So my rating for Welcome to Your New Home out of 10 is a 9 excellent. A great start to the season, and it has me really invested in the show, frankly in a way I haven't been before, and I have high hopes that Season 2 will be even better than Season 1. I just hope that they don't dilly-dally on this Prison Break storyline for too long, but I can't wait to see where they take these characters from here. So that's it for my review of Welcome to Your New Home, and unfortunately I have to announce that I will not be doing weekly episode reviews for Dark Matter, which was originally my plan, but then I learned that Vikings would be returning next week, which I will be covering, and along with my weekly Game of Thrones, Star Trek, and Mr. Robot videos means I will be too busy to cover Dark Matter weekly. However, I will cover the finale of Dark Matter and do an overall review for Season 2, and perhaps some other thoughts on Dark Matter on my Facebook page, so if you haven't liked my page on Facebook, please do so, as I will try to share some extra thoughts on that as well. Also, if you do want to check out weekly reviews for Dark Matter, I highly recommend checking out Geeksiders reviews for Dark Matter, as they will be covering this show weekly, and their reviews are always quite good, and I highly recommend them. So I'll leave a link in the description below for their channel. If you're not subscribed to Geeksiders, you should go ahead and do that. But be sure to check out my channel for many more videos on shows like Game of Thrones, Star Trek, Vikings, Mr. Robot, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.